everyone. We have a few people who have messaged actually and said they're joining a little bit late, but I figure it's 5 after, so we should get started. I'm Aislin and I lead the Oxford Business Alumni Network here in San Francisco with my committee members, Ian, Ibby, and Seamus. We are doing this event jointly with the Los Angeles OBA, which we're excited to do for the first time. And doing events digitally is actually offering us some opportunities we haven't had before. So thanks to Ed, Shree, and Sasha with the Los Angeles OBA for running this. And we plan to run these informal chats approximately every 2 weeks while we're under the shelter-in-place order in California. And we'll be chatting with different alumni about some of the transformations that they're witnessing in various industries. And we hope to use this time as a way for all of us to connect virtually when we're not having as many opportunities to meet in person right now. The structure of this event is I will hand it over soon to Jason, who is the general manager of Eurofins, and he's going to tell us a little bit about some of the transformations that are going on, specifically in the nutritional supplement industry right now. We'll then open to Q&A where you can type your question into the chat box and we can go around and unmute our lines. And then after that, really, we just want to have this open to everyone. If there's a question someone has for something they're working on, anything that our community can help them with, we're happy to chat and connect here. So I'll hand it over to Jason right now.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Aislin. So once I can share my screen, I'll go ahead and pull up my slides. Looks like I'm good to go. Great. Present. Perfect. Can you confirm, Aislin, you can see my screen?
I can see your screen.
Wonderful. So it looks like a small group on live for right now, but that's great. Hopefully that'll encourage more Q&A and a good discussion here. As Ashley mentioned, I am Jason Mulligan. So for the last 3 years, I've been a general manager for Eurofins Supplement Analysis Center. We're located in the North Bay. Our lab's been in operation for 37 years. And throughout that time, we've tested botanicals, herbal products, and dietary supplements. In the last year, my scope has increased to being the primary revenue generation manager for sales across the organization for all of our supplements testing. And I'll show a slide that explains what that means. What I'm hoping to convey tonight is a narrative of what's been happening over the last 6 or so weeks in the supplements industry. And I'm curious if there's similarities in other industries and some things that might be transferable, lessons learned, and where there's some differences. So if you'll allow me, we'll go on a little journey of what we've learned and experienced over the last few weeks in times of COVID. So a little overview of Eurofins. It's a global organization headquartered in Brussels, Belgium, with sites, over 800 sites throughout the world. It's a network of laboratories that play in a number of spaces. I'm in the US food division where nutraceuticals, dietary supplements falls into, but we're also world leaders in pharmaceutical testing, clinical diagnostic, environmental and cosmetic testing, among others. You can just see from the slide, the key takeaway here is Eurofins is a very diverse organization, large, and it's decentralized in how it operates. Here's just an overview of our sites in the US. So the orange over in Northern California, that's supposed to represent the Petaluma area, and we're tightly partnered with our sister lab in Orange County. So I'm thrilled to connect with this community and hopefully get to meet some of you when we can all connect in person, because I travel frequently between the Bay Area and the LA area. So this is the perfect crowd for us to get to know each other, and certainly for me to try to connect in with others as we go. So this again just conveys the range, diversity, and size of the organization, specifically testing food products and, in my case, dietary supplements. So one key contextual point to start out is the FDA regulates supplements, and that's really become official for the last 25 or so years with DSHEA, the sweeping federal legislation of 1994, the Dietary Supplements Health Education Act. And what that act did was establish the rules of the game for brands, manufacturers, raw ingredient suppliers, as well as for consumers in terms of the testing requirements, quality control, documentation control, et cetera. What's key and relevant for this conversation is this bullet I have, which is really the driving clause for a lot of the testing that happens and is required by the FDA and that my labs perform. And I'll just read part of it is the brands and supplement companies are required to first establish specifications. And there's a lot of work that goes into establishing accurate specifications, but then they need to verify them. And that has to happen by conducting at least one appropriate test for identity, purity, potency, or strength and composition of any component that's a dietary ingredient. So that drills down into quite literally every dietary ingredient that's in a product. And in conversations with friends and family, even many supplement users, they're always surprised to hear that the FDA regulates supplements because of the statement on the back, which distinguishes supplements from drugs. More on that in a little bit. So in addition to understanding that context is we're talking a very large industry. I guess that's relative to whatever industries you're all in or coming from, but at least for supplements, projections from Nutrition Business Journal and others show we're on track as an industry to pass the $50 billion annual revenue mark. You can see that the sales growth is projected to slow over the next few years. But I think what's key is it's a big industry, and in a number of surveys, Americans are reporting about 3/4 of Americans are reporting taking dietary supplements in some form. Many of you might be in that group. I certainly am. This is just context of the size of the industry. So as we all know, mid-March, COVID-19 hits the US. Things start getting real for all of us. March 19th, our governor issued the Bay Area stay-at-home or shelter-in-place with this statement around essential businesses may continue to operate. So the first questions we all had, especially around leadership, are we essential? The American Herbal Products Association the following day highlighted that California was the first state in the US to explicitly designate the food and dietary supplement industry as essential. A few days later, the Cyber and Infrastructure Security Agency, which falls under the DHS, also issued a statement federally that dietary supplement workers are considered essential. So, and that really is from this third bullet down below, because it explicitly called out workers in food testing labs, which for my colleagues and I were highly concerned on whether or not we'd be allowed to continue to operate in our regions such as Orange County and the Bay Area, which were among the first to issue this kind of requirement. And I put an asterisk. I wanted to call out that supplements qualify as food under the Federal Food and Drug and Cosmetic Act. So just a little bit of background knowledge there. There was immediate advocating from the trade organizations, the leading trade organizations around the supplement industry, to remain essential. And some of the data points to support that were the figure I gave you earlier, around 3 in 4 Americans use at least one natural product or supplement, and really the size of the industry, nearly 400 billion in wages and 15 billion in taxes. That's a significant amount. And that quote comes from Daniel Fabricant, who's the president of the Natural Products Alliance, one of several major trade organizations that Eurofins works with regularly. So the headline is COVID-19 sent consumers, and maybe many of you, shopping for supplements. Trying to understand why and what was happening in a survey issued towards the end of March for about 1,000 consumers, 36 replied an increased use of supplements. And it's unsurprising which ones. They're the supplements that it's common knowledge are associated with immunity support. Vitamin C grew significantly, zinc, and then elderberry. Ashton and I were joking earlier, which she had stocked up on, and so did I, jumped over 400%. What's also interesting is the halo effect from those types of spikes with other supplement categories such as sleep and stress related, for example, melatonin. that was reported as spiking, as well as omega-3 fish oil. So some of the data that Nutrition Business Journal collected and just recently on this was the amount of surge that's expected to remain for the better part of this year, upwards of 25%. But with that demand, there's also the other side, which is the source and the supply. The USDA sent a request out to our leading trade organizations asking them to survey their members to try to understand where exactly the supply chain issues are and what they are. And so I'll show you some data on the following slides, but what's really driving this, and the figures are somewhere north of 70% of the raw ingredients for all dietary supplements that we consume in the United States originate in China or India. Significant percentage, whatever the total actually is. So with China having many factories closed and many of the shipping and transportation services delayed, that immediately caused an impact to the raw ingredient supply. Then we saw shortly after that the nationwide shutdown in India, exacerbating the issues. And some of the trade councils are saying, you know, part of the shortage and issue is also, sure, there's these sourcing issues, but it's also this sort of loaded term of panic buying that many of us did, and there's still some research underway to figure out why and what's driving it, besides let's just, you know, build up our immunity. Some of the reports on those shortages from the surveys we've learned in just the last week were specifically on these raw materials that I listed in the first bullet. Many of them may be familiar to you as part of your regimen, but there's, you know, some common ones such as echinacea, elderberry, reishi mushroom, turmeric, and then what surprised me was food ingredients such as lentils and rice. Some of the major letter vitamins, vitamin C, and CoQ10, among others. But in addition to that were supplies such as organic alcohol, ethanol, that are used for much of the botanical extraction that happens to go from a raw ingredient to a finished product, a tincture, or other type of consumable format or matrix of a herbal product, as well as packaging materials, glass bottles, and sanitation supplies. All were reported by the surveyed companies that are in this industry as where they're seeing some shortages. So what's, I think, interesting from a consumer perspective to hear, and this might be a new point or a new take on your dietary supplement consumption, or it might be perfectly common knowledge to you, but what the supply chain disruption really means is potential for adulteration. And while there's a high degree of quality control and oversight and regulatory oversight from the FDA, there's still adulteration, particularly in the botanical and herbal supplement industry. You see the quote from Lauren Israelson, who actually is a Queen's College graduate. He took his law degree from Queen's Oxford years ago, and that was a great point to connect with him on. He's the president of the United Natural Product Alliance, and I think this quote really resonates, that with shortages and rising prices, those really are the recipes for the bottom feeders to do their dark work, which happens. As I mentioned, with containers out of rotation, that causes surges in freight prices, again, motivating the bad actors. But on top of that, there's a number of factors colliding, including that the FDA does not have agents going out right now conducting inspections. And the threat of the FDA showing up at any random time is a great motivator to achieve compliance. A few weeks ago, they issued a statement that they would be conducting virtual inspections. It's still unclear what that means, which raises questions of how are companies self-policing, self-regulating to continue their quality control programs. Here's where I think Eurofins and other third-party private testing labs really play an important role, because especially in the divisions that I'm responsible for and work within, our jobs are to verify the ingredients, the identity and quality specifications, which runs the range of heavy metals testing, contamination in the form of pesticides, residual solvents where that's applicable for herbal extracts and other types of extracts that have the use of solvents, as well as bacteria, allergens, and the full range of what we've all come to expect is happening for testing around these types of products. I really like the point from the American Botanical Council, who issued a statement throughout the industry urging buyers in the supply chain to double or even triple down on their quality control measures dealing with ingredient identity and authenticity because of the current risk of adulteration. So all this is happening. Production, the brands and manufacturers are unable to keep up with production. But as many of us know, particularly those who are in manufacturing or in environments that require a high number of employees working close together, their workforce and our workforce could fall ill or worse at any moment. So there's this immense pressure to meet demand, to produce, butted up against how do we do this without introducing risk to our employees and continuing the spread or enabling it. This was something I'm really proud of Eurofins emerging as a leader in the industry. Our US food president, Sean Murray, gave an excellent overview of the actions Eurofins has taken across our United States food testing labs to the entire industry who participated. Over 500 companies joined a call that was hosted by the American Herbal Products Association about 2 weeks ago, where Sean laid out our key learnings. And we had a little bit of an advantage because we have labs in China and throughout Europe who were a little ahead of the curve and certainly ahead of the US. We kind of knew what was coming and were able to gain some lessons learned. Some salient points from that were the detailed segregation plans that every single laboratory was required to comply with, that Sean and the executive leadership sat through, no matter what size the lab was, to do a walkthrough of the zoning. So we numbered effectively each room and each space in our labs, color-coded them, printed that information out, and made it perfectly clear where an employee could be and at what time. We went, like many companies, to nursing shifts and split shifts, and then leverage redundancy where we could. Having such a large network really helped in that regard, because if a lab were to go down, we would know exactly what to do to ensure that the samples were to be tested in the right place, or in the way, with the methodology and instrumentation required. In addition to that, Eurofins, I think now, is currently the third largest clinical diagnostic testing lab in the country, actually testing patients for COVID-19. And we've come out with environmental swabs. So if any of you are in manufacturing or work in companies that have more than 1,000 to 2,000 employees who are in close quarters, you have health services on site. There's a number of factors to be in compliance or to be able to be a candidate for that environmental swab testing. Reach out and I'll coordinate for you. But anyway, so Eurofins is heavily involved in that way. So safety first. This is a primary concern for all of us leaders in manufacturing and particularly in operations. Some other interesting direct impacts. These are direct bullets from some of our top customers who are large, publicly traded nutrition companies that you see in everyday retail, big box stores. So they're reporting impacts such as staff capacity down 50%, and several of these are in major hotspots for COVID-19. So it's unsurprising to see figures that large. They're unable to meet their production demands, particularly for immunity products. They're expecting those particular products to continue to increase. And with that, they're having to source from new raw ingredient suppliers, which again introduces the risks of not maybe having fully vetted those suppliers. And that's where rapid turnaround testing really comes into play. And with that, they've already given us the alert that they expect increased orders of turnaround time, or increased rush testing, or priority testing as we call it, on their tests that they send out to us. Many of these manufacturers have capabilities, as we call it, in-house, and then they send out to us. The immunity products they're reporting are selling faster than production allows. And again, they're seeking new suppliers to overcome the disruption for key ingredients such as gelatin was one that these particular companies reported. Here's some other impacts directly on these companies. And again, there may be some learnings here where there's regulatory compliance concerns in your particular industry. Questionable claims. Many of you may have seen this, but the Federal Trade Commission, as well as the FDA, are starting to take immediate action against marketers who are making deceptive or completely false claims on their products and how they might treat, cure, or prevent COVID-19. Those terms, treat, cure, or prevent, are squarely under the definition of a drug, which is the primary distinction from a drug and a dietary supplement. And that's why when you read a supplement nutrition label or label, you read the statement that these have not been evaluated by the FDA, because those products are not intended to treat, cure, or prevent anything. And none of us want that, because then each of those products, including, for example, our chamomile tea, would have to go through clinical trials in order for us to consume it. So that's a nuance to part of what was so crucial to the Dietary Supplements Health Education Act, and was also certainly a boon for the industry. Enforcement issues, touched on this earlier, but while the FDA is taking action against deceptive marketing, they're unable to go out and inspect. So we're still unclear how that's going to play out and what that's going to look like in the coming weeks and potentially months. As we all know, for those of us who've ordered supplements online in the last month, maybe many of you are in that category, with those changes in our ordering and buying habits, that introduces a potential supply bottleneck. And companies are reporting this, it's still unclear how that's going to play out. We've all heard the talk of economic slowdown. There's speculation in the supplements industry, just like there is in yours, I'm sure, around are we insulated? How will we be impacted? What exactly will this mean? And that really ties into and is associated, I think, with the future implications of COVID-19 on the industry, because maybe with this spike in purchasing supplements, more people are making a connection between their health outcomes, their immunity, how they feel, and supplementing their diet with a nutraceutical, an herbal product, botanical product, etc. So these are all, I think, really interesting impacts that are open questions as it stands right now. Here's some other questions that I thought were not only relevant, but these are under discussion in a webinar that's happening, hosted by the Natural Products Insider Forum, I think tomorrow or the next day. So highly relevant that we're touching on this right now, because the industry itself is asking these questions and people are trying to understand, why exactly are supplement sales spiking? Are people actually taking these products? Are some people hoarding these products? What's going on there? What channels are the products selling in? Is it the natural products channel? Is it online buying? What exactly is happening there? What's going on in the supply chain more specifically? What I've shown you so far is just the limited data that's become available in the last 2 weeks or so. So that was all as current as I could find in the last couple of days. And then how do we really view these supplements? Do we actually think think of them as an insurance policy? Is this a time now where, for me personally, what I've enjoyed in primarily working from home for the last 6 weeks and not traveling on a plane once or twice a week like I had been, is I've been able to really dial in my daily routines in a whole new way, which includes taking supplements. Or others in that same position? And then back to what's selling, where are there shortages? Is it all immunity focused? Is there that halo effect in the sleep and stress categories, in the joint health categories? Maybe people like me are exercising more often. I've heard that feedback from a number of friends and family members. And then really central from the financial or economic consideration is, do we think that these sales are going to stay up and actually sustain? Or is this just, some buying that's happening over the last month or so that's going to tail off? All open questions to be answered. And I'm really curious when we get to Q&A if any of these considerations are also true in your respective industries. So with that, I think that actually is our segue into the Q&A. So I'm happy to take any questions that I can, and I thank you all so much for, let's see, that was maybe 20 or so, 25 minutes. So hopefully that's right on time, and we'll take it from there. In fact, Ashlyn, I'll just keep that up and then see if I can. I also have all of my sources to pull this together. But Ashlyn, maybe you can moderate. It looks like I might be limited in while projecting and seeing the
Sure thing.
questions.
I'm happy to read off the questions that come in.
Okay. Yeah, and then maybe others who are muted, if this did generate any questions, or even if you'd like to share how any of these points are similar to what you're experiencing, I personally would be highly interested in that. Or if any of the points on the slide piqued your interest or you wanted to ask a specific question about it, I'd love to field that.
A question to start, which is, you touch quite a bit on online sales right now. Have you seen any trends with supply chain in stores themselves? Because I know we've all witnessed or been in the really long lines at Whole Foods or Trader Joe's. I haven't experienced personally going and then being out of any supplements or health products that I needed, but I'm curious if there are some trends there.
Yeah, good question, Ashlyn. What I've seen anecdotally and in talking to leadership at the trade organizations is that sales have shifted to online. People are not running to the grocery store to buy their vitamin C. I mean, actually, vitamin C is probably a terrible example, because if they are going to buy anything, it is vitamin C or elderberry or zinc, like we saw. But I think because the general shift has been to shelter in place and avoid the runs to the grocery store for supplements, I think stores are well stocked. And that's what I've observed, in the handful of times I've been running out to the grocery store over the last few weeks. But that also aligns with what we've seen in the most recent data. There'll be more coming out in the next week or so. I've also been curious about that. But the general point that I've read and that the data shows is that all sales or majority of sales are coming from online purchases.
Very interesting. We'll wait for a couple more questions. And I would say to the group, please ask anything. This is meant to be an open forum, so we're happy to have an open discussion.
Hi. Hi, I have a question actually. I'm back. I actually work in apparel retail, I kind of touch in supply chain. I'm curious to whether you're seeing any opportunities in your supply chain now that it's been kind of squeezed.
Well, yeah, that's a great question. And what I'd really have to do there is to poll our clients, because in the space, in the part of the ecosystem of the supplements industry that I fall into is really quality control. And so for me to understand, it's huge. Like I presented, to understand the supply chain current state and where there's shortages, that's conversations and understanding the surveys and information pulled together on what the producers, contract manufacturers, and brands are experiencing in the supplement space. What I can tell you is there has been a number of shifts now where, as supplies or sources, especially sourcing that originates in China or India, a number of brands and manufacturers are having to find alternative sources. What I think is interesting about that is it's introducing the option to look around the US and see if there's a local source. And I'm finding that, for one personal example, is one of the largest tea and herbal product manufacturers and brands that's actually in Sonoma County. They've reached out because one of their primary labs and ingredient suppliers in Europe were unable to do global shipping, or the delays were so severe that they needed an option in the US, which was great for us because that gave us an opportunity to emerge as one of their partners for testing. And I think what's fascinating about what you might have to experience, and what I think a lot of companies are experiencing, is that it's forcing considerations that otherwise wouldn't have come up. And I think we're going to find that in this messiness, there's actually better outcomes and maybe more local outcomes that we just never considered before. So that's what I'm seeing in terms of the experience of the clients that send their testing to Eurofins, and what I'm hearing from friends who are having similar supply chain constraints.
Yeah. Struggle right now.
I feel for you.
Hey, quick question on what you see happening, I guess, in the future. So obviously there's been a big shift to online purchasing, right? How do you see that changing when normality returns, or when things get a bit closer to normality anyway? Do you see people moving back from online to going into retail locations, or do you think people are going to get used to online and stick with it?
Thanks for that question. I've been wondering that myself, and I find, and I'll talk about this from my personal experience, because personally, it depends on where I'm shopping. And if I'm going to a place where I know the staff is highly knowledgeable about supplements, where they know, and from the degree that I look at it, where I'm seeing the analytical data and have all the information necessary to know who has the safest products, even though I'm not the interpreter of that, my function is really to tell companies what's in their product, and they're really the judge of it, and ultimately what they share with the end users and with the public is up to them. What I look for when I go into a store, I'll give you an example, would be Pharmaca, which we have in the Bay Area, and I think throughout California. They have about 30 chains, but there was one in Sonoma close to the lab I run in Petaluma. And the staff there were incredibly knowledgeable, and I learned a lot in having conversations with them. They understood supply chain constraints. They understood the sourcing for some of the leading brands. And that would, for me, I would prefer to go in and have a conversation with an expert who, has studied herbalism for 30 years and could really talk intelligently about the products. Although what that might do is, like, I might learn that, make a purchase if they're having a special or not, or go online, because many of these companies, especially new entrants, run promotionals, and it's hard to turn down the 15, 20% off your first offer. What I think is going to happen is, if consumers are satisfied with the purchases they're making online and they establish a relationship with the brand, they'll probably stick with it. And I think a lot of companies are trying to use the sticky tactics to nudge subscriptions and get people to buy and sign up for a 6-month or year-long or indefinite commitment unless they opt out. And I've fallen prey to a few of those where, all of a sudden I have, a year's supply of a lion's mane mushroom powder for my coffee, and I'm not using it as fast as I thought. But what I think is going to happen is people will end up sticking with, if they shipped it to online and that's working for them. I think there's going to be a number of new habits. That's proven true for my wife and me in a few other things we've just found we can purchase online and not make a run out to the store. And so I think brands get that, and they're also moving online. And there's so much disruption in this industry. There's players, I'll call out a few that I followed closely. There's Ritual for Ritual vitamins that has completely changed the game for the multivitamin, and a lot of their rapid growth over the last few years, and they're actually based in LA. Their rapid growth has been through extremely savvy marketing through Instagram, and they're meeting their target audience where they are. And for that demographic and many others who are looking for the companies that are really running on their marketing is based on their quality. They're seeking USP verification, which is United States Pharmacopoeia. That means those companies underwent significant methodology verification to do the verification of each specification for each dietary ingredient in their products. Companies are realizing we're demanding that as end users and consumers. We want to see those verifications that companies are putting their quality first and they're transparent. So I think between the combination of those transparency, marketing, in the right places, and then also having the online subscription model, which Ritual has all of those. They're changing our buying habits. And I think, like we're seeing in many other industries, the fast movers are present right now. With all the noise, they're finding ways to emerge. I mean, I'm seeing it in the advertisements when I scroll through my Instagram feed, stuff that it's tempting to click, and these algorithms are so good. So I do think that there's going to be some lasting changes from all of the shift in buying habits that we're all experiencing now. Great question. And again, that's just my personal perspective.
Excellent. We have a question from Shelley, which is related to shortages. How long do we anticipate this shortage is expected to last? And then with that, is the byproduct of these shortages less optimal health for the population that doesn't consume these? And then an additional question is, just curious, of all of us on the call right now, how many of us have purchased vitamin D, zinc, or elderberry or other items specific to COVID online or off compared to, say, taking them beforehand?
Great. Yeah. So a live poll. I love it. Yeah, let's get that. And Aislin, you can put me down for some of those purchases. So the first question, one point of optimism here, I guess to tie in with what I'm trying to convey on my thank you slide, is the sun's going to come up. And I think we're seeing that already in China. I heard a report recently that baseball is back on in China. And I'm a former D1 baseball player, and that excited me. And we're in conversation with our lab partners in Suzhou, and we have 3 locations around China. They're doing fine. And what we're seeing is a lot of the manufacturing is coming back online. I don't know if that's true in your respective industries, but that's what we're hearing on the supplement side. So while things are not quite, haven't turned a corner yet in India, China does seem like it's beginning to emerge, which is good. And China's received a lot of bad press, and in some cases for good reason, on the sourcing of dietary supplements. What I'm really excited about is a joint venture with the United Natural Product Alliance, Eurofins China, and the Chinese government. We're working on a really interesting program to vet and introduce quality control as far left in the supply chain as possible for sourcing, to have a registration where these raw ingredient suppliers have to go through some degree of quality control testing before they enter the supply chain. So it's an audacious undertaking, but we're going for it. And in each of those parties has I think enough stake to do that. But the bigger picture, to answer your question, is we're slowly starting to see this in China. And we're already seeing news reports about cities around the US wanting to start slowly emerging from this. Obviously, I couldn't predict a date, but just going on what I'm reading, what I'm hearing, the conversation among leadership is, I think we're probably a few weeks out still before this happens in a greater degree around the country and globally. But hearing this news of what's coming back online, particularly around manufacturing in China, that encourages me. Ashton, I might ask you just to rephrase or repeat the second part of the question. I think what I understood was, for Americans and for those of us around the US who do not take supplements, what are the implications? Maybe could you rephrase that? I just want to make sure I understand the real spirit of the question.
I think the way I'm understanding it, and Shelley, feel free to chime in if I'm misrepresenting this, is if a certain portion of the population is taking a lot of supplements and there's a portion that is not taking any supplements, could there be adverse effects for those who are not taking the supplements?
It's just so dependent on your level of health and your fitness. I'm just going to speak on my own. I have a long background in personal training and have a number of fitness and health related certifications. And I'll talk about this not at all from Eurofins perspective, but just from Jason, from my own perspective, is the answer to that, I think, is a direct function of your state of health, your diet, your sleep, the quality of your sleep, all of those factors which ultimately contribute to how healthy are you. And that's such a, I think, an elusive thing to measure unless you have, objective basis, which would be debatable. But ultimately, I think for the way I think about supplementation is really a direct function of what's the quality of my diet. And I think a lot of people and a lot of nutritionists would share that. And I think the key takeaway there is, or the insight is, it's not because so many people are now taking these supplements, it may or may not increase their immunity. I mean, certainly it helps, I think, to have the defense of vitamin C, maybe vitamin D, and some of the other immune boosting supplements, but they may not be as effective as getting 8.5 hours of quality sleep and exercising daily and all the things we've all come to know are the basics of just sort of getting it right. And so I wouldn't think too much about that. If you're not a user of dietary supplements, it doesn't mean you're at any greater or lower risk. It could, but there's so much of what's contingent there, or how much depends on really getting to that answer. The one thing I will say though is, get your diet right first, and dialing that in before going to the supplements. And the short on that is consume more natural foods that have vitamin C or some of the other properties you're looking for. That's always, I think, better than going straight to the supplements. And again, that is 100% just me talking, and in no way representative of Eurofins or any other companies I'm affiliated with. So thank you for that question.
Coming off of that, I have a question. Have you seen any growth in particular categories and supplements? Just me speaking personally, I've been taking the My Community medicinal mushrooms for immune support, and it's one of the few supplements I've taken, and I've noticed pretty instantly I have more energy. I feel like my immune system's stronger. But then when I've gone to go repurchase it, it's sold out everywhere. Are there any categories where it's something that was not very popular beforehand that maybe after this pandemic people will continue to take?
That's such a great example. And I don't know if it's related to the current moment with COVID-19, because mushrooms as a category have truly exploded in popularity over the last few years. And there's another huge player that's rising in the LA area, Four Sigmatic. I think anyone who takes or looks for mushroom products has probably seen their supplements. Really well designed little packets that have combinations of various mushrooms and coffee and hot cocoa and other products like that. Those are, Aislin, doing really well. And I personally, while I personally like that company, I'm also a huge fan of Paul Stamets. He is a legendary guru of an icon in all things fungi, and I have no affiliation to him at all. But if anyone's who's even remotely interested in mushrooms in the mushroom world, check out his TED Talk or documentary, Fantastic Fungi. But that is a category that is seeing growth. I don't have any data points on it, but I am personally taking, lion's mane, turkey tail, reishi, and a number of other mushrooms specifically for their well-researched, well-documented immune boosting properties. So again, that's personal, anecdotal, but I think you're right in seeing those shortages of that particular category, and we're probably going to see that continue, which is great for the companies who've gotten involved in that category over the last few years. And for the companies out there paying attention to what people are buying, that was a smart move, and I think it's proving to be even smarter now. So thanks for that question.
Any other questions or comments? We're also happy to open to, general questions, general networking if anyone wants to make an introduction.
And Aislin, would it be easy for me to share my information with this group, email and contacts, so in case there's some question or follow-up anyone wants to make, they can feel free to reach out?
Absolutely, and you can put that in the chat, and then I know that the recording of this will be going out to all of the participants and everyone who signed up and who wasn't able to join tonight. We had a lot of people from time zones around the world sign up, so they will watch the recording after. I can also reach out to Hannah with Oxford as well too and ask if she can share your information to participants.
Great. Okay, I just stopped sharing the screen for a moment to join the chat. So I'm just going to drop my email address in here, and then that should be sufficient for now. So it's just my first name, last name. Oops, let me send that out to the whole group. One moment. Perfect. So you can reach me there. And I, as I mentioned at the start, in normal times, I am in Orange County a few times a month. I would absolutely love to meet you all who are down there and find ways to connect. If you have any interest in supplements, supplement testing, I'm happy to share what I've learned, share what I'm doing, and I'd love to learn about what you have going on. And it's been a great pleasure to connect with you all, at least virtually. And Aislin, I'm really grateful for you to invite me to speak on this subject. So I hope this was interesting. Hopefully everybody learned at least one thing. And yeah, I'm really grateful. Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks, Jason, for putting that all together. That, I personally learned a lot, and I'm sure the rest of our group did as well. I will put my email address in the chat as well too, because we're very happy to hear any suggestions for future topics to cover. If anyone has something that they want to cover, we'd be happy to have any alumni speak on some of the changes that are going on in their industries.
Perfect. I'm just skimming some of the chat. So really interesting comments and points. So I'm learning a little bit here as well. Great. So I think with that, are we all wrapped up, Aislin?
I think we're wrapped up unless anyone wants to chime in right now. We can let everyone get back to what they're doing this evening.
No, thank you. It's been great. It's yeah, it's good. It gave me a second to actually think about my self-care in the middle of all this craziness.
Good for you. I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, you guys. I appreciate it. And Aislin, the question was pretty much answered. It was related to the gap that people would have. I think the gap that people would have with their supplements if there is a supply problem. So where there's a supply problem, there'll be a gap, and people that take supplements, their immunity may go down. And then there's an economic kind of function to this too that I was kind of curious about, not to elongate the conversation, but that's kind of where I was going with that.
That's a really great question. Shelly, right?
Yeah.
Perfect. So yeah, Shelly, I've been thinking about that myself, and I think there's a risk of becoming reliant on these products. I'll just share with you some of what I've been doing. I practice a style of yoga that has, it's centered on different types of Kriya and Pranayama practices that are basically, yeah, it sounds like you're familiar with them. I'm doing a lot of what I can do that's natural and free and doesn't include buying something or taking something. I'm really fortunate up here in Northern California. There is a freezing cold river about a minute from my house, and I spend a minimum of 15 minutes in it a day. So I do these cold water immersions. And I think you've dialed in from Laguna, if I saw that right early on. So you've got that ocean right there. And my river's about 50, 52 degrees. And the point is I'm finding ways to overcome that risk. So I'm not so reliant on, the supply chain for these supplements. I think they're valuable. There's value in them, but there's so much we can be doing from our just not only daily habits, but primary nutrition through our diet. So I'd honestly, if you cleared out my supplements cabinet right now and said you got to carry on, I'd be fine. I wouldn't be too worried about it personally.
I agree. Personally, I'm an investor. So, I mean, personally, I agree with you. Nutrient dense foods, you know, get out and get some fresh air. We're lucky to be in California. But from an investor standpoint, it just seems like there could be it's kind of interesting to me. I'm not clear on if the supplement industry is going to go like this, or if it's going to go like this or go down. I think my hunch is it's probably going to go down because of the supply issue. But I'm not an expert. So it was interesting, your speech, and also learning more about Eurofens as well. And I'm down in Orange County, so look me up.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, and you're not alone in that prediction. And that, you know, so with the trade organizations and a lot of the contributors, they want to be positive, and they want to increase the tone that things are going to be fine. In fact, this is going to be a lasting trend. But reality might be a totally different story. I think it's my honest impression is it's going to be mixed. I think some companies are going to do really well where they found redundant supply chains, or in the most positive outcome, they found, I'm seeing an interesting post here, but a non-availability of transportation. Thanks, Suhas. He's in the chat is making a great point. Where there's discovery of a new supplier that might end up being better than who these companies were working with, that might be an example of where companies do really well. It's so, I think the mess of this situation is going to be so interesting to see how it ultimately plays out. My gut is it's going to be a mixed bag.
Thank you, Aislin, and thank you, Jason.
Thank you. And I'll chime in briefly, Shelley, before you head off. I'm not an investor, but I'm a banker, and I'm seeing some of the same trends myself. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, just to reiterate the point from Suhas, it's not necessarily the supply, but it's actually the means to transport that supply, and that's spot on. And I think that's another key factor. I touched on it briefly in the slides, but that's also part of the factors colliding with this ultimate result of supply chain disruption.
Well, great. If we don't have any more questions or comments right now, I think we can adjourn. Thank you again, Jason, for taking the time and doing such a good job there.
Thanks so much, Aislin. It's a pleasure to meet with this group. I really look forward to connecting with you all on LinkedIn or direct over email, or in person once that day arrives. So thanks so much, everybody. Have a wonderful day, morning, evening, wherever you are.
Thanks.